So today, to my Dharma friends, spiritual friends, I'm going to give a Dharma discourse. So first of all, the students have debated. I'm very glad for that. So it's to learn the logical procedure through debate, starting with the subject called collected topics, is very good for opening our intellect, the eye of our intellect. So with regard to the teaching of the Buddha, the different important points of practice must be demonstrated. The truth of them must be demonstrated through reason and logic, and should not be merely based on faith. So Buddha Dharma in general, and particularly the Nalanda tradition, needs to be studied through logic and reason. So the debate that the students have just presented is very good. I'd like to greet you, the students, and also thank you for that. So, with regard to the discourse during these 3 days, starting from today, and today and tomorrow, we are going to go through the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life with short comments here and there. And then on the 3rd day, I'm going to do the Avalokiteshvara empowerment of the great compassionate deity. So just as I have just said, Buddhism has to be, we have to go about with the teaching of the Buddha through logic and reason. So Buddhism, and particularly the Nalanda Sanskrit tradition of Nalanda, uses a lot of reason and logic to analyze the teaching of the Buddha. And so today, many of the educated Westerners also consider investigation and examination of the teaching things to be very important. And so we also have the same kind of tradition since the times of our forebears. So when I have discussions with Western scientists and also philosophers and so forth, I really like that, because they too are fond of scrutinizing the truth of things. And so, not only saying that such and such things are in accordance with the will of God or intention of Allah and so forth, So Western scientists and other scholars who are fond of using scrutiny and investigation of the teaching likewise, since the times of our forebears, and particularly since the 8th century, since the time of the Master Shantarakshita, Tibetans have also emphasized using logic and reason to investigate and analyze the teaching of the Buddha. And so, debate that the students have just presented is very important. We are reciting the Heart Sutra. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagiri at Virtual Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of Sangha, of monks and a great gathering of Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi, or concentration that perceives all phenomena, called profound illumination. And at that time, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, while practicing the profound perfection of wisdom, saw in this way, he saw the 5 aggregates to be empty of by intrinsic nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, how should a son or daughter of the noble family train who wishes to practice a profound perfection of wisdom? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, said to Venerable Sharadodiputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice a profound perfection of wisdom should see in this way. Seeing the five skandhas, or the aggregates, to be empty of intrinsic existence. Form is empty, emptiness is also form. Emptiness is not other than form, form too is not other than emptiness. In this way, feeling, perception, formation, and mental formation and consciousness are empty. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are empty. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and purity. There is no decrease or no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no mental phenomena, no eye dhatu, up to mind, no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, and no end of old age and death. No suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation, no path, no wisdom, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by the means of perfection of wisdom. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend misconceptions completely and have passed definitely beyond all suffering. All the Buddhas of the three times, by means of perfection of wisdom, fully awakened to the unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Paramita mantra is thus said in this way, that Yathagate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhi Soha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, the great beings, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, the great being, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is. O son of the noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Shariputra, the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, the great being, that whole assembly and the world of its gods, humans, Ashuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. So, Chandrakirti, who was the follower of Master Nagarjuna, who is known as the second Buddha, Chandrakirti, in his Madhyamaka Avatara, pays homage to great compassion in his Madhyamaka Avatara. So he says, as compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood, the water that nourishes it, and the fruit that is long a source of enjoyment, I'll praise compassion at the start of all. And so, compassion is considered to be important in the beginning of the path to enlightenment, in the middle, while you are training in the path or treading the path, and at the end when you become a Buddha. So, whatever different kinds of birth, forms of birth you may have come about through, such as taking birth from the womb of a mother, or being born from some egg, a mother's loving kindness and care are very crucial for our life. So we have started our life with mother's love and compassion. And because of the mother's love and compassion and care, we have survived. And so our life started with compassion. And therefore, being kind and compassionate throughout our life is crucial for making our life meaningful. So for that, kindness or compassion is very important. So of course, the different religious traditions may have different philosophical ideas and concepts, but compassion is something all of them teach commonly. And therefore, compassion is the most important factor for our life. So love is something with which our life began. With the mother's love and compassion, we started our life. And when at the time of your death, if you are surrounded by loving and kind friends, you'll be happy at that time as well. And therefore, love and compassion are very important in the beginning of our life, in the middle, and at the end of our life. And secondly, human society. Of course, we as human beings are dependent on our communities. We are not alone. So therefore, since we are dependent on the community or the society we live in, if we are friendly with others in our community and society, we'll be happy. As a social beings, if you remain selfish, that doesn't actually conform to the reality of your being in a community. And therefore, it is very important to be loving and compassionate while living in our communities or human society. There are sayings such that if you are kind and compassionate, your path will be good, and if your intention is bad, your path or what you do would be bad. And so everything depends on our mind. As a follower of the Buddha, a monk in that, and someone who reflects on and meditates on or contemplates bodhicitta, the spirit of awakening, and the view of emptiness. With regards to bodhicitta, which translates into Tibetan as Changchup, Sem and Changchup here refers to enlightenment. So when you are meditating on the spirit of awakening, Buddhahood, to have this intention to become a Buddha for the benefit of all beings, you feel very peaceful. So that also helps your longevity, helps to have a long life. Of course, we have practice for long life. So if you remain full of jealousy and arrogance and so forth, you will not have a good balance of your elements of the body. So if you maintain a peace of mind, you will naturally help yourself to have a long life. And so for longevity also, peaceful mind, kind-heartedness these are very necessary and important. Craig Jude. Deshaur, Dijigor. Chichina. Dusshasta. Jackie, Diri.
kalte ngata me sem zampo yo na teo pan to sa cha kalte ngata nangku wa tene khongto yo ngarya yo thadok yo semman yo teo yo na tene te seru pe tena che pan to sa ma no so ha so ba sa ngata chi so se na dukan bija te chi so me mi gun na nyam po thullam chu che te bija te tene ngata sem zampo jo bo cha to kha ni cha so te sem zampo yo na tene semba rolo de semba rolo de na zupon de mo se cha so tene tene na ta se no yom ya cha ne semina tene da si so se sem ma pa ko te se ru chi na te tem che pan to yom na no so oi
So as I've just said, regarding myself, I consider bodhicitta, the spirit of awakening or enlightenment, very important. So it helps me to have a peace of mind and that I can consider those beings who may be called enemies or adversaries to be objects of my compassion and love. So of course, there is so much trouble and problems and difficulties in Tibet, but from my side, I always think how I can help those Chinese perpetrators to overcome their negativities, and I never think of harming them in any way. And so because of that, as a result of that, I feel happy and peace, and because of that, I have many Chinese friends as well. So when others try to harm you and you try to retaliate with harm, then there is no end. There will be no end to this kind of a cycle of suffering and all these negative emotions and thoughts. As long as we are human beings, we are dependent on the society we live in. And therefore, if you bear a good heart and think of helping others, benefiting others, if you can make your neighbors friends with yourself, you'll be happy. Whereas if you remain full of jealousy, arrogance, and anger and so forth, and actually perceive the community that you are living in as your enemy, you will never be happy at all. And so, in general, we should bear positive state of mind towards all beings, and particularly the beings on this earth, and specifically people around you. Then you can expect world peace as well. If you are full of anxiety, jealousy, arrogance, and so forth, and you will never be happy. And with these kind of negative states of mind, we build weapons, missiles and so forth, nuclear weapons and so forth, and there will never be any happiness. So if you remain selfish and so forth, you will always suspect others around you. When you look to your right, you'll see others to be your suspect that they may harm you, and similarly to your when you look at the people to your left, you have that kind of thought. So of course we talk about peace in the world, but unless we are able to bring peace within ourselves, there will never be world peace as such.
Chitama mi tene dabule mi samete sewa gosama pa inam so ketana mata tene kimse tetina kal chitopada mantra delio tebola ketena chambata sewe tene samsu kobo ta jikstena tene dapsa kalte mata khana jide zere ji semina ketena dansen dam ane control dam tene to se thado so maria so se tilu semiokan bijate so kirtana ram chizin maram samkan ye yokan bijaste tene kirtana mata jikte jide zirte khana zerchan mene tene kirtana chiga tene mata dam diri mana tene soncha mampo tene tradik chene tene ose yi gyatak pina kirtana soncha mampo tradik mampo choska oso ta zamning jide zerchan mene tene ode oso tene chik tu so zada mata na tene maram samkan sambabo ram samba chespa imkan sambabo yona nyampo khoyang mos no michara samte tu so se tene mata na semina tene nam tok ram indas kamo tene nam tok ram indas ke khoyang mino aja kape maje ka mino samte tel samdo kurkan bijate dam diri tene sonchata minda mampo spong te tene tene so mampo ta inam khane ke tene zaming jide de samno ta no chojas bo ke tene teo so se la chik chen do no somba sanara sen zampo chona kalte sen zampo yorna tene ke tene teo so bo se men chak tunam jada yo no sem jide yo no ram ke to yo no karchi to pe na madam rute teis ke to yo no kimse jo teuna del jala jo ke to yo no so
no ya ngari kamo na chinju ga
When I was a small child, I used to eat apricots in Nobulinka, the summer palace of the Dalai Lamas. In the summer times, when they ripe, I always pluck the apricots from the trees in Nobulinka and eat them. So even now, though I'm old, I have very good teeth, so I can still bite on these apricots.
Tene kertena, tebu kertena, sosano nyampo, tene skundunskyo, tete kana tene zuwa, nente chate tene dona de diusion so pasar gumlo tene getu kapdu je antelto tene chen ma jara ngari ko done
In Tibet, children, when they first lose their teeth, the teeth is broken into pieces, and then there's a prayer which says that may the child not have teeth like a horse or donkeys, but may they have teeth like auspicious lamb, which is seen as a symbol of kind of prosperity. So bearing a good heart, because it is the root of our happiness and peace, all the religious traditions have the same message of love and compassion. And Buddhism, particularly with Nalanda tradition, we use logic and reason as to demonstrate the importance of, to prove the importance of love and compassion. For example, if you have an adversary or an enemy, they are seen as, if you are able to perceive that person, your adversary, as someone very important for your spiritual development, then you will be able to develop compassion and love towards them. So you can see them in the light of positivity. So if you remain positive and perceive others to be in that light, you will always perceive others to be your friends, and rather than looking at them as adversaries.
Angusi ngata snow scarpane dusman bi ngata snow scarpane nyampo tiola sem zampo kazuga chogo so kazuga chia tiola gyunsan kazu chia samlo tang se tene tiola dusman balon tene ngata sem zampo tang tene chamba so nyeje so checha se tablam ma jala tante cha de nalan de tradition na ha tene skundum khona sam tene ki nyamle no sa te te so kertena darjen nyamji bona tene changchu sem nyamle no za de so Sombasanara, sem zampo keltena, diski dirsawa yutena.
So in Ladakh is adjacent to Tibet, and therefore that my Dharma friends in this Himalayan region, if you can bear good heart, it'll also help the Tibetan cause. So people of Tibet have hope in me to resolve the Tibetan issue. I will never say to my people to use force to achieve our goal. Rather than that, if we bear good heart, positivity, kindness, and so forth, it has its own power to resolve our issue. Changes are happening in China. So authoritarianism is outdated since the time of Stalin in Moscow. Things have changed. authoritarianism has changed, and everywhere people are talking about democracy. So if for democracy to be effective, if we have good heart towards others without bearing any kind of malicious thoughts, that real peace can happen. So there are 7 billion people on this earth. If we, as human beings, the 7 billion people, can live in harmony with kindness and love and compassion with one another, there will be real peace in the world. Rather than that, if you remain jealousy, full of jealousy and so forth, having negative thoughts, world peace is merely going to be lip service.
Tene migun lama naksha testane chapa tengula sem zampe thongna tene ngata jal tega jal khabu lencha se thuksam tacha tante lapcha jal zacha mene chujan sa tene jamia stol ko sa no jamia zingbo sa no kanso se tene tapcha mama sa me so ha pene ketena sem zampo chan ya ko denbara amusi ngata kabu dujman la se kwena yuraji leba no tanta leba no also aran spene ketena Maskona tafsi communist kertena Stalin tene kertena chigana Maskona tafsi tene jana sapata tene tene na jura dem heaven jigmana tene chiga te communist kertena tik minu zerkan samsut na jura shante lebani yote somba sanara democracy yana mangsu ringlu po tene gosha du zerte miguni chiga asupa kertena samsulena jura lete jaso somba san kaltenga ta sem zampo jig men na ta dukan migune na tene tidam tuba kurte tene kertena zamli na jide kongchan man nyancha men also ha tene manma bina skundu ne tu so da pa tene I ngata chanchu sem zerkan ko kalte gom na tene kazuk shi yon nam jiktene ta kazuk shi yon na te sama kertena shnyene no samkane shnyene nampa tene ngata thongnam jig skechas po tantan duk so na somba sanara chanchu sem bodan da se sem zampo yon na amos so sam shir so po na ngata thong khoi thongnam bu kertena den ma shnyene sulama zabi sula tuzuk shi tene nama jingata skegi yote no so te visha tene zamning ji de indo ya mi mun skit tondo ranga skit tondo te chanchu sem to na yo chata dan no so kalte to men ba khana kertena jigten zamning ji de to khana ya lapana kertena tu chona te mati so tasa jigten na kertena mi tumchur dun yo so te samna samutang se te mun skit tondo chata nam sakpa semina yura mele keluna chonya chas kaspono sombasan sem zampo tene chogo shaspo khasane no
As a leader of the Tibetan people, from that perspective, if I speak, the Tibetan public always have their hope in me. So, people from Ladakh up to Arunachal Pradesh, if you can develop and bear the heart of love and compassion, it will also help Tibetans inside Tibet as well. As someone who is wearing the monastic robes of a Buddhist monk, I will never advocate violence, using force and arms to gain, to fulfill our goal. So as I have said earlier, changes are happening inside China as well, and there are increasing number of Buddhists in China these days. So the true cause of Tibet, the just cause of Tibet, if we can struggle or work for that goal to resolve the Tibetan issue with love and compassion, there is always a chance to fulfill that. It can never be fulfilled through force by using arms and weapons. So we are resolved to use nonviolence, love and compassion as our instrument and tools or weapon for fulfilling our goal. And therefore, more and more people, Chinese people, are turning towards our tradition. And we have some books that are published in India, such as Science and Philosophy in the classic Indian Buddhist classics, which are translated into English and also Chinese. And the Chinese professors or academicians in the universities have access to them. And therefore, after reading these books, some Chinese scholars have said that the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is in the true spirit of Nalanda tradition, and that it is a scientific religion. So using force, weapons and so forth to fight for Tibetan freedom would be short-sightedness for us. So you, the people of Ladakh and people across the Himalayan region up to Arunachal Pradesh, if you can make non-violence as your practice through love and compassion, it will really be effective to help the Tibetan cause as well. So more and more people love and compassion, non-violence. So even modern scientists, neuroscientists and so forth, find a lot of things to learn from the Nalanda tradition with regard to the workings of our mind and emotions. So people who take interest in learning about mind and emotions, I have many friends who learn from our tradition. It is not about, we are not talking about propagating Buddha Dharma as such, but we are actually having discussions and dialogues with scientists from the point of view of academic discipline, not as religion, when we discuss about mind and emotions with the modern scientists.
Ladakh na tansaji mon sape tene mata kimale riju di miu sam tene mata pot mata shirik tik tik yute tene kyujam de sam sem zampo choja ko tene ma khata kyuje to jam de sam tene ke tene por la jide utara tene tata am tosa no so ha that's good to taste in one too. So, Jana and Telema, Jurassic strategy, heavy and also. Then it's good to tell that in the sun, Tatu Kuntu Zepana, Sandi Kuntu Zepanto, the Chaspe Marco Postcard and our Riga Gate. They were original Gute, they were Janiska, Gute, Things special Jana Hela Yampo, Jana Yotan Chan, Migu, take it up to Sela Yampo, then the Komuna Ma, it's a strange factor. For the Tata, your candidate, Chosko, Nalandi, should you tell them that Jute do in a matter of those that Komune, Tola Habjut, also. Soma Samara, Dasi, Devija, Kundum Kona, Tusem Lampo, Chanchu, Sem, Zachata, Telmatan, Jeju, Zakan, Vicha. Jana Purina, Telechiga Katana, Napeso, Tata Chokanami, Mama, Chenetan also. Tenana Lucho, Yotani, Tele Sandipa Yendo, Ya psychology syndrome, Temuna Kertena, Tele Temuna, Tele psychology scorda, Nalanda tradition in Katana, Ma, Tele Tim Zapotan Yokotela, Delta Chapter, Demoto, Habu also. Nogasa, Temunism, Tenata, Nalanda tradition, Chojupa, Ma, Shanti still also. Then it's good to say scientists from down, then psychologists from down, to the trolling that on the Yampo, Komina, Channel, and also. Then the Komiam, Yam Skundum, Jate, then the psychology, then the Ketan seminar, then the Jurakazu, Zampokazu, Komodu, Yuraman Pam, Kazuba, Kapos, the Kansola, then the Skundum, Kandi, Mamposhu, and so on. So, Kujana, Himalaya, you can review Kunisam, Madame. Sharing teaching, Tevija, the future, Chanchu, sent the Kate Bona, Body, for the Nimafina, Jiden, the Chastam, then the Tanden, Tochasolama, and Tanted to some loss. Skundun intended to some hotels on the way, for the Ketana, Jide, Chastam, for the Tanden, the Jafati, Tochas, Ketana, 7 is the number so that they Tochas, to some that they pay, Jafati, Michi,
And the machine, Luju Yingwa, Chishigi, and the coaches get medals.
Though it may not be so relevant or serve any purpose to talk about old historical things, but during the time of Songtsen Gampo, the 33rd Tibetan king, he married a Chinese princess, and with the Chinese princess, the famous statue of Buddha, which is in Chokhang in Lhasa, was brought to Tibet. So, though Chinese Tibetan king and Tibetans already had some family connection with the Chinese, Songtsen Gampo at that time had been very visionary to have a new Tibetan writing system devised for Tibetans. And so, during the time of the later king, Trisong Detsen, who invited the Indian Nalanda master, Chandarakshita, to Tibet. And so Chandarakshita, after coming to Tibet, had actually advised the Tibetans to start translating the Tibetan, Indian books on Buddhism and logic and so forth into Tibetan, so that in the future the Tibetans need not resort to Pali or Sanskrit Indian languages, but can actually study the Buddhist tradition in their own language. So since then, the translations were carried out, and we have today over 300 volumes of Kanjur and Tenjur, the translated words of the Buddha and the translations of the exegetical treatises. So all the major subjects There are the different subjects are in our own language, comprised in these Kanjur and Denjur. And so, most of the treatises and the words of the Buddha that teach the profound and the extensive path are in our own language, including those of the epistemology and logic. And so, the way we have carried out the study of these subjects, the profound path of Madhyamaka view and epistemology and logic and so forth, is such that we begin by studying the primer texts, called collected topics, and then we go on to study what is known as the study of mind and awareness, and then the study of logic, which deal with the formal logical procedures. And then we go on to study the Abhisamaya Alamkara, based on which we study the perfection of wisdom sutras, and then go on to study Madhyamaka and so forth. I have also gone through this curriculum. So, Master Kamalashila was a student of Chandrakshita, who came to Tibet in the 8th century, and Chandrakshita prophesied that there will be some disturbance to the Dharma in Tibet, and there will be a vague understanding of the teaching of the Buddha. And at that time, the Tibetan king and the Tibetan ministers should invite Kamalashila, his student. And so Kamalashila accordingly was invited to Tibet, and in the center the Tibetan king sat on his throne, and to one side was Kamalashila, and to the other side the Chinese meditators sat. And then they had a debate. The Chinese and the Indian master Kamalashila had debate. And so Kamalashila was able to explain the teaching of the Buddha through logic and reason, the vast and the profound teachings of the Buddha, whereas the Chinese didn't have that skill. And therefore, the Tibetan king Trisong Detsen sent away the Chinese monks back to China with due respect. And therefore, the Tibetans held on to the Indian tradition coming from the Nalanda monastic institution. This tradition comprised of the profound and the extensive the path of leading to Buddhahood. So these days I meet with many different scholars from the Buddhist tradition, as well as other scholars. And so because of having done my studies in these traditional subjects, which I learned through debate, using logic and reason, I don't fall short of what to say to these scholars during our discussions. So when we use logic and reason in our debate, certain subjects which may be obscure to us, which need to be proved through logic and reason, during our debate, when suppose I am answering the questions coming from the other scholars, and the other scholars quote certain lines from the Kanjur, the word of the Buddha, and if I cannot accept their view, what they are trying to prove, still, even after when they quote the Buddha's words, I would say it's not necessarily the case that what you are saying is what the Buddha's words are meant.
Oh yeah. 다섯 담배 그돌이야. 롱장치. 제공수 시작한 시간이.
So when we debate and the scholars quote from scriptures to the opponents to show their contradiction, the monks of Sera monastery would say, you have gone against the scriptures.
등식 자초지도 소
제가 되게 다 말을 무슨 미기 통.
So, what I have just related is from my own experience, what I had witnessed in my childhood while studying the collected topics, study of mind and awareness, and study of logic and reason, and also the study of Pramana Vartika Karika, Abhisamaya Alamkara, Madhyamaka, and also I studied Abhidhamma, Koshakarika, and Vinaya, the monastic code of discipline. So the system of debate was initiated in Tibet by Chapa Chögyal Singye sometime in the 11th century. I have met with many scholars from different Buddhist traditions, like from Thailand, Sri Lanka, and so forth. And I've found that the way we study Buddhism in the Tibetan tradition is excellent.
Tene porla dasinga ta pobjong chota ne regla me tona jangcha so ketena man hala shashi gyurte du songa hal somba samna chapa chochi singye jukan bi tene taksal tamcha si lukso I tiga bo o technique ko ketena ma hala shashi cha du songa ha somba sam porla tene pobjong jangcha so ka bo ketena regla me tona jangcha so ketena ma spus tapo kum tapo shashi tene tapshi gyurte du songa ha skondo tene Thaleni khaspai ro ya ketena Sri Lanka ro tezu mampo na tu te janda joana nyampo tene podi tene se te chega ketena robjong chocha so ketena mas stapo ji ka tene zik tu so
아주 자갈 리로데 나즈 댄서네
So after coming into exile, in the beginning of our exile life, so we had many scholars, Tibetan Buddhist scholars, but in the initial years of our exile, many of these scholars were working as road builders in Himachal Pradesh, in certain places called Chamba and so forth. So one time I was in Chamba, where they were working, building roads. So I had a monastic bi-monthly confession session with those monks, and also we were not in monastic robes, but we were wearing the traditional Tibetan layperson's dress, chuba. And then we also had a debate session. But later on, we re-established these monastic institutions of Debung, Seragadhan, Atashilambu, and so forth in south of India. So with our arduous effort, we worked hard with determination and dedication, and therefore today, we were able to establish those monastic institutions in South India. And so today, these monastic institutions are thriving, and the number of students are also increasing. The students who study Buddhist philosophy and logic. So this profound and vast Buddhist tradition that we have, even while in exile, we have introduced these in our secular schools, where the students are also taught Tibetan And we have these instructors who are called philosophy instructors or philosophy teachers in these secular schools to teach the traditional philosophy and logic to the students as well. So we have been quite successful in preserving our tradition and religion, our spiritual tradition, even while in exile so far. So you Ladakhis and the people of the Himalaya region also follow the same tradition as Tibetans. So this tradition is not only about beating the drums and making some offerings to protect the deities, like beverages and so forth, and merely doing some ritual, but it is very important for you to study the Buddhist tradition through logic and debate, reason. So after coming into exile, not only the monasteries for monks, but I also urged the nuns to study Buddhist philosophy and logic. And so everyone equally, laypersons or monastics, please pay attention to the study of logic and reason in your study of Buddhist philosophy.
Skundun sensik tiga Himachal Champadersa tene snaziga pespe sona. Tesana lam chokane tezu edu versa chotana nyampo khaspa mampo lam choska kulie du son. Tesana tene temuna tarchal metpa scavenger gonte du son ha. Scavenger yotna scavenger gonte tene sobjong dik sospin son ha. So masana pa tezu snastam bodite skundun ma tur skyo son ha. Tene gyagar juwa, tene yuaji pu, tene yang pilona rogram chetan gona yuaji pu la zate, tene ute te khaspa gon, tene dushu te suma zate, kama zate, tene daksa tocho wa yotkani, tene sera daspun galdan trashilu bato se temu tene suga zapi suma ha, temu suga zate, daksa tene ma tena popjung gyana zate, tene ma khaspa ma potonte tene osi. Tezu nanjin chos tene mata tene po di rigjumbo tene yang tene stanpo gyurcha sonte alucha sepia tene turson zate te gyala sonte gyala sara. Te son basana daksi tene mata po de tene jungchen mo jangcha riglan thongla jangcha so ma khacha ne no so tene mata laras pa mona tene po na mata sherik chikan me cho chikan chik inkan bijate Kyujang sang tene, yung chen mo tene, shesha te poshicha, speche tontak shesha te poshicha wosha, ma kakcha ni no so mane re tang, ngab re tang, sepkem re tang, teo chik, teo ke tenang, tenang chik ma, gal chen mo na no so ha, speche tontak shesha te pe, temo rigla mi tonga shesha te pe, tene, kyujang song wosha, kakcha ni no so. Tena nangjin na ladara yotkani bolpa mo ni sa, temo tuksam salte, yung chen mo tene reglamen tongna tene sheshu tsati tapche tsati maka tsane songa tene skundu ne tevu songa dana pa chiga skiao ta traba zate hobjong zate kya pa pomo tene tsunma zate tene yung chen me hobjong zate teo sokse tene shoji na tene skundu ne tsuba zate songa ha tevu na tene pomo na tsunma zate yung chen mo reglamen tongna shesha tene tapche zate hobjong zate mampo yo ma gyala dogu songa 송바상 라다스방라 스콘도니 테네마 자타 합자 참여상 소체 쇼치 때우스 마자다라 된 규제상상 중체네 동탁세샤 스페셜 동탁세샤 때우 레글라멘토나 세샤 때네 손도 쇼고 자고 테네마탄 용차샤니 투올라 마카카니 노데도 스콘도니 마 합자마 제가 사사 송바상나라 때우 켈테는 마탄 고쇼상 동나 볼테 때우 가주냐노 쌈 보셔서 각자님 참.
어야. 애는 춘주간에 그래서 이때 되는 애는 저거샤워.
So after studying Buddhist philosophy, I then finally sat for examination, and I went to Drepung and Garden and these monasteries first to sit for examination through debate, and then I also sat for the final examination at Jokhang during the Munlam festival in Lhasa underneath a white parasol. So during that time, during my Lharam examination, there were many great scholars. So the scholars were very nice, and while they debated with me, were not trying to be naughty with me or unkind with me. But though they were kind with me during the final examination, I was still very nervous. My heart was beating quite strongly. So I, being from someone from the Amdo, northeastern part of Tibet, finally was able to sit for the Haram Geshe examination. So Geshe Laram degree examination was like something like a PhD in study of religion. In one of the scriptures on the monastic discipline, it is mentioned that for the monastics who have gone forth from the home life should put their effort in studying the teaching and also meditating on the teaching, doing meditation, and not only be satisfied with the monastic robes. And so, through one's study and meditation, it is said that one should preserve the teaching of the Buddha and not merely being in robes. So this quote, the verse which His Holiness quoted says, through one's study and meditation, one should make this life meaningful and never be satisfied with merely wearing the monastic robes. So of course I did study these classic treatises, which were also studied by other geishis and scholars. So though the geishis and I have done the same kind of studies, but I'm not fully equipped with the logic and reason when it comes to doing some discussions with the scientists and other scholars, modern scholars. I don't fall behind them. So the majority of my life has been spent in exile, and during this time period I have met with people from different parts of the world who take interest in Tibetan Buddhist tradition and me, and I have received the Nobel Peace Prize. So I have the name of a Nobel laureate. And since I have had discussions with many different people from different backgrounds, many Westerners admire me. They pay attention to my teachings on kindness, compassion, and also the teaching of emptiness taught by the Buddha. So I have, in a way, I can say I have made some contribution to the teaching of the Buddha. And so the monastics here also, for you also, it's very important to study the teaching of the Buddha, not merely be satisfied with the monastic robes, wearing them. So as it is said that the teaching of the Buddha must be preserved through study and practice. You should do that, as I have been doing myself. So the people in the Himalayan regions must feel determined, have the courage and the determination to work towards study and meditation to preserve the teaching or the doctrine of the Buddha, which comprise of scriptures and realization.
Scientific psychology and technical and Lama also technical and Koni, Sambazampo Chochasi, Lapchan and Chastam, then dark men Zerkani, Tegun Kulia, Shesha, Koni, Tapshe Shanticho also, then Nukchok, then Kaspar, Skondulama, Shantistian also. Tamatan Sperabo doing also had then Sangasi, then Sumbo Ketena, Tegula, Objum Zate, David Tontapo, Hagoju, Shatpa, Rubeguna, then Sangasi standard Zimbo Shatpo, Kachani also, Trachapan, Samji Tenam Chitene, Lapchen, Tuaman also, then Dasa, then E to speak at any Ladakh Pamela, Skonduni Tebo, so and so on. Kujan is a special house. Jungchemo Sheshase Koshisho, Teo Shestina, Yamle Chase Koshisho, Jinun Pabunino, Tenizana Tene, Jungchemo, Shadu Nisigona Tene, Tarchu Zachaspo, Teo, Chaspel Zachaspo, Ma, Kachani, and so on.
Oh, yeah. Tatari. Igala, under the Juju.
So first we are going to go through, I'll just start with the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. I received the teaching on this text from the Kinori master, Kuno Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen Rinpoche. So he was someone who practiced bodhicitta very much. So when he was in Lhasa in Tibet, my senior tutor Yongzhen Rinpoche had received teaching from him, and after coming into exile, I received teaching on this text from him. And so when I had discussions with him, I found out that his main practice was this spirit of awakening, or bodhicitta, this altruistic spirit of enlightenment. And so I received from him the transmission of this text, Bodhisattva Charya Avatara. And then, having received the teachings from him, I have done my best to reflect on this teaching and also study this text. So this is some kind of a background to the teaching.
Lama jigen kan tugyus kyo song ha tene kong lhasa yugdo sana tene lhasa yug sana tene rignas mangpo kaspa in kanji tukong kyo song ha tene de changchu che jurchu jupo tene kong jucha sui tene jiga gongsa jus fasa jiga no song ha tene skundung kona nyamlen zancha song tene changchu semi nyamlen zade song tene kertena control del cambio che tenen caso che metcancio cosa sempre un po' che tenen caso che yarja tango shadow so sambo tene odupo tene nawanji jung so ra
So with regard to this bodhicitta, when we do the bodhicitta ceremony, we come across these lines where it says, in order to fulfill the interests of myself and others, I shall generate bodhicitta. So for fulfilling one's own goals and also to fulfill the goals of helping others, as well as to accrue positive energies and so forth, bodhicitta is the main factor. What you are thinking of is benefiting directly or indirectly, or benefiting all sentient beings with this mind or the thought of bodhicitta. And then in this text that we use for bodhicitta ceremony, having generated or cultivated this supreme mind of bodhicitta, I will call on all sentient beings as my guests to this feast of enlightenment. And so it is very important to practice bodhicitta. It's very practical to do this rather than doing deity yoga practice, where you visualize yourself as some deity and recite certain mantras and so forth. Rather than doing just that, if you have bodhicitta, it really practically helps you. So with regard to this bodhicitta, the altruistic spirit of enlightenment. I reflect on it daily, and it really has impact on my mind. And then with regards to meditation on emptiness, I reflect on emptiness using Master Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara, the entering the middle way. So towards at the end of this text, there are 3 final verses. I reflect on these verses in the 6th chapter. And so, having meditated on emptiness and bodhicitta over a long period of time, I can feel confidence that I have some experience. And if I am able to develop single-pointed concentration, focusing my mind on emptiness single-pointedly, I feel that I have some hope of reaching this true cessation. And so, if you are able to combine study, reflection, and meditation in your daily life, you will be able to have that kind of confidence. And it is if you are able to do that, combining study, reflection, meditation on bodhicitta and emptiness, there is hope that you may be able to make yourself on the path. So the verses that His Holiness was quoting from Madhyamaka Avatara, or entering the middle way, are these. Thus illuminated by the rays of wisdom's light, the Bodhisattva sees as clearly as a gooseberry on his open palm that the 3 realms in their entirety are unborn from their very start, and through the force of conventional truth, he journeys to cessation. Though his mind may rest continuously in cessation, he also generates compassion for beings bereft of protection. Advancing further, he will also outshine through his wisdom all those born from the Buddha's speech and the middle Buddhas. And like a king of swans, soaring ahead of other accomplished swans, with wide wings of conventional and ultimate truths spread wide, propelled by the powerful winds of virtue, the Bodhisattva would cruise to the excellent far shore, the oceanic qualities of the conquerors or Buddhahood. So when I reflect on my own life, Master Tsongkhapa, as Master Tsongkhapa says, following such a teacher and having become a renunciate, having studied the conqueror's words not too poorly, this monk who strives in the yogic practices, such is the depth of his reverence to the great seer. So I also feel that I am in the following in the footsteps of Master Tsongkhapa, someone who was born also in the vicinity of Kumbum, where Tsongkhapa was born. So I feel that I have made this human life that I've found to be meaningful as well. So with regards to this text, Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, written by the great Bodhisattva, Shantideva, he was someone who lived a very humble life in his monastery, and many of his peers were actually looking down upon him. So they were saying that he did nothing and he was a disgrace to the monastery, and therefore if we leave him like this, it would be a great disgrace to the monastery or the monastics, and therefore the monks of Nalanda at that time wanted to expel him from the monastery. So in order to do that, he was asked to lead a monastic confession ceremony, and so they planned for him to lead that confession ceremony. And in order for him to lead, they set up a high throne without any stairs leading to that. And then he pressed, with his miraculous power, he pressed the throne and then sat on it, and then he taught this text. So in the text it says, there's nothing here that has not been explained before, and I have no skill in the art of composition. Therefore, lacking any intention to benefit others, I write this in order to season my mind to it. And then when he reached somewhere in the ninth chapter, which is chapter on wisdom, perfection of wisdom, he was said to have actually risen up in the sky, and then slowly he vanished from the sight of the monks. But later he was found in another place in India at that time. And so Master Shantideva was someone who was very learned as well as accomplished practitioner. And so, to begin the teaching on this text, the Tibetan text starts with the title of the text in Sanskrit, and then the title in Tibetan, and then a homage to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas by the translators. And then it begins with the actual text. Respectfully, I prostrate myself to the Sugatas, who are endowed with the Dharmakaya, as well as their noble children, and to all who are worthy of veneration. Here I shall explain how to engage in the disciplines of the Buddha's children, the meaning of which I have condensed in accordance with the scriptures. And then the verse number 2, which was read earlier, and then verse number 3 says, for due to acquaintance with what is wholesome, the force of my faith may for a while increase because of these words. If, however, these words are seen by others equal in fortune to myself, it may be meaningful for them. Leisure and endowment are very hard to find, and since they accomplish what is meaningful for humanity, if I do not take advantage of them now, how will such a perfect opportunity come about again? Verse number 5, just as a flash of lightning on a dark cloudy night, for an instant brightly illuminates all, likewise in this world, through the might of the Buddha, a wholesome thought rarely and briefly appears. So the Buddhas of the past became enlightened because of bodhicitta, and the present, those who are becoming Buddhas also come about through this practice of bodhicitta, and the future Buddhas will also come out with the same factor. And therefore it says in verse number 7, all the Buddhas who have contemplated for many eons have simply seen it to be beneficial, for by it the limitless masses of beings will quickly attain the supreme state of bliss. Those who wish to destroy the many sorrows of their conditioned existence, those who wish all beings to experience a multitude of joys, and those who wish to experience much happiness, should never forsake the awakening mind. The moment an awakening mind arises in those fettered and weak in the jail of cyclic existence, they will be named a child of Sugatas and will be revered by both humans and gods of the world. And so, through the practice of bodhicitta, one will eventually and finally become a Buddha. So it is like the supreme gold elixir of gold-making elixir, for it transforms the unclean body we have taken into the priceless jewel of a Buddha form. Therefore, firmly seize this awakening mind, since the limitless mind of the sole guide of the world has, upon thorough investigation, seen its preciousness. All beings wishing to be free from the worldly abodes should firmly take hold of this precious awakening mind. All other virtues are like plantain trees, for after bearing fruit, they simply perish. Yet the perennial tree of awakening mind unceasingly bears fruits and thereby flourishes without end. So bodhicitta, the positive energies that you accrue through bodhicitta, is not like a plantain tree bearing fruit and then simply perishing, but it is like a perennial tree of the awakening mind. Like entrusting myself to a brave man when greatly afraid, by entrusting myself to this awakening mind, I shall be swiftly liberated, even if I have committed extremely unbearable wrongs. Why then do the conscientious not devote themselves to this? Just like the fire at the end of an age, it instantly consumes all great wrongdoing. Its unfathomable advantages were taught to the disciple Sudhana by the wise Lord Maitreya. In brief, the awakening mind should be understood to be of two types: the mind that aspires to awaken and the mind that ventures to do so, as is understood by this distinction between aspiring to goal and actually going. So the wise understand in turn the distinction between these two. Although great fruits occur in cyclic existence from the mind that aspires to awaken, an uninterrupted flow of merit does not ensue, as it does with the venturing mind. And for those who have perfectly seized this mind, with the thought never to turn away from totally liberating the infinite forms of life, from that time hence, they, even while asleep or unconcerned, a force of merit equal to the sky will perpetually ensue. For the sake of those inclined towards the lesser vehicle, this was logically asserted by the Tathagata himself in the sutra requested by Subahu. So through the meditation and cultivation of bodhicitta, you will be able to enter the great vehicle path and then tread on the path to enlightenment and finally become an enlightened being and be able to serve others. If even the thought to relieve living beings of merely a headache is a beneficial intention endowed with infinite goodness, then what need is there to mention the wish to dispel their inconceivable misery, wishing every single one of them to realize boundless good qualities. Do even fathers and mothers have such a benevolent intention as this? Do the gods and sages? Does even Brahma have it? If those beings have never before even dreamt of such an attitude for their own sake, how would it ever arise for the sake of others? This intention is to benefit all beings, which does not arise in others, even for their own sake, is an extraordinary jewel of mind, and its birth is an unprecedented wonder. How can I fathom the depths of the goodness of this jewel of mind, the panacea that relieves the world of pain and is the source of all its joy? If merely benevolent intention excels venerating the Buddhas, then what need to mention striving to make all beings, without exception, happy? Although wishing to be rid of misery, they run towards misery itself. Although wishing to have happiness, like an enemy, they ignorantly destroy it. For those who are deprived of happiness and burdened with many sorrows, it satisfies them all with all joys, dispels all suffering, and clears away confusion. Where is there a comparable virtue? Where is there even such a friend? Where is there merit similar to this? If whoever repays a kind deed is worthy of some praise, then what need to mention the Bodhisattvas who do without it being asked for of them? So we have completed the first chapter of this text. See you tomorrow.
Mangpojik daksa meneman askot maskot tepia ye daldan mimangla ladar nangsos tang gonsos si chokna lakpa nish chingste talmo jartengeja sangma gusmon juat turje zate